Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. The sky above the hall was suddenly wreathed in the light of flames as a gigantic three-legged golden crow appeared amidst the fiery sky. Its wings were spread wide and it let out a long cry which tore through the air. After this, the three-legged golden crow descended from the flames, and as it descended, it left a long scarlet curtain of fire in its wake. The fire curtain descended from the top of the hall all the way to where the emperor's throne was. Once the three-legged golden crow touched the ground, it disappeared. Behind the curtain of fire, a blurry figure could vaguely be seen seated on that throne. Everyone within the great hall uniformly rose from their seats. Yunche was also pulled up by Yun Qinghong. After which, everyone present knelt on the ground. We respectfully welcome the little demon empress. Every single person who had the privilege to be invited to the Demon Imperial Hall were undoubtedly the strongest of the strong. The sound of 100,000 overlaying voices rising in reverence produced such a vastly powerful sound that it caused the ears of the weaker profound practitioners to reverberate, while also causing their internal organs to churn. And if this was just some normal hall, the power of these voices could cause it to vibrate until it collapsed. Everyone, you may rise. A severe voice rang out from behind the curtain of flames. Everyone returned to their seats, and when Yunche returned to his seat, a look of suspicion crossed his face. This voice, why does it seem so familiar to me? I've clearly never seen the little demon empress before. Following the descent of the little demon empress, the hall became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. A heavy atmosphere seemed to envelope every corner of the hall. At this time, the figures of two tall women slowly surfaced from behind the curtain of flame. The two women had features that were both pretty and solemn. One of them was human while the other was a demon, and both exuded the powerful aura of the tyrant profound realm. They extended their hands at the same time and took hold of the fire curtain. After which, they slowly pulled the burning curtain of flames to the left and the right, revealing the figure of the little demon empress. Yunche had always held a deep curiosity regarding just what kind of person the little demon empress was. So after the curtain of flames had been parted, he steadily stared at the figure which was seated on the throne. Her appearance was exactly as Xiao Yun had described. She was wearing grey clothing and she was not adorned in the imperial splendor expected of a ruler. Moreover, her figure seemed exceptionally tiny, and at first glance, she seemed to have the body of a little girl, but once he could see her features clearly. Yunche's eyes widened instantly and his body swiftly withdrew to the back as he placed his body behind Yun Qinghong. "Hey, big brother, what's up with you?" Xiao Yun hurriedly asked as he noticed Yunche's sudden strangeness. She's the little demon empress." Yunche stammered as his tongue tied itself into a knot, as his teeth started chattering. "That's right." Xiao Yun automatically replied as he nodded his head. "Big brother, you seem to be really strange right now. Could it be that you've already seen the little demon empress before?" "But didn't you tell me that the little demon empress looked terrifying and that her face was fierce and forbidding? This little demon empress looks completely different from the way you described her." If this place was not the venue of the grand ceremony, Yunche would have roared at Xiao Yun until saliva sprayed his face. The little demon empress was swathed in grey clothes, but underneath all of that loose grey cloth lay an exquisite and delicate body. Both her eyes were as gloomy as the night sky and they emitted a coldness that seemed like icy knives. However, her features were exquisite and beautiful and they seemed to be carved from snow and ice. This was clearly the grey-robed little girl whom he had seen outside Demon Imperial City 3 nights ago. She was also the person who had nearly killed him. That little girl was actually the little demon empress. That she was the little demon empress was nothing much. What was more important was that on that night, in her ignorance, she showed her naked body to Yunche, and Yunche had observed every single part of her body. He had even continued to look for 15 minutes. And the most important thing was that after he got caught by her, even his face was recorded in her memory. Is this some kind of cruel and unusual joke the heavens are playing on me? Yun Xiao had an innocent expression on his face. "I did say that the little demon empress was very scary. Oh. I also recall telling you that I didn't dare to look directly at her face. What I really meant was that the little demon empress aura, gaze, and temperament was extremely terrifying. Every time I saw her, my heart would start beating wildly and a chill would run down my spine. But I never said that the little demon empress features were scary. After all, everyone recognizes her as the #1 beauty in the illusory demon realm. Tilda. Yunche suddenly had the urge to throttle Xiao Yun to death, that last sentence. Such an important piece of information, why didn't you tell me that day? Xiao Yun's neck contracted and his expression grew even more innocent. You didn't ask me what the little demon empress looked like, moreover. I felt that this information was not really that important at all. Yunche smacked his forehead as he choked on his words silently. But now that he thought back to that day, when Xiao Yun called the little demon empress terrifying and scary, he was referring to the feeling she gave off, and he definitely did not say that her features were scary. But the way he described it made it very easy for one to think of a sinister, fierce, and forbidding face that people would not dare to look at. Furthermore, since she was even older than his father Yun Qinghong, she should definitely be a middle-aged lady. So with the description provided by Xiao Yun, he definitely would not be able to connect the little demon empress to a little girl who did not look a day over 15. And even though she was also dressed all in grey, it did not tell you anything, because it was far too normal for those who worshipped the little demon empress to imitate her style of dressing. And even though she used the golden crow's flames, all of the illusory demon royal family could also use the flames of the golden crow. Right now, Yunche was tangled into a complete mess. This scenario was simply too stimulating. Before this, he was calmly thinking of how he and his father could solve the crisis that the little demon empress would encounter during this grand ceremony, but now, the one who faced the greatest danger was actually himself. Whether he could walk out of this place alive today was totally an unknown quantity right now. He had actually seen the stately little demon empress naked. This kind of charge perhaps could not be cleared even if he had his head chopped off 10,000 times. After all, this was the little demon empress who had been officially wed to the little demon emperor as it was witnessed by all. This was the ruler of the entire illusory demon realm. Yun Qinghong shot a glance at Yunche. His face was filled with suspicion, but just as he was about to ask, the little demon empress slowly rose from her throne. From the time this empress had succeeded her husband's position, in the blink of an eye, it has already been 100 years. In these 100 years, even though I have been unable to make any great contributions to our people, at the same time, I have not led our people into chaos and disaster. So it could be said that I have acquitted myself adequately in this task that my royal father and husband has entrusted to me. The 100-year reign ceremony is normally an occasion of great celebration, but this time it is different. This empress has reigned for 100 years, and it has been 100 years since my royal father and husband have passed away. Even though 100 years have passed, I have not yet been able to avenge my royal father, nor husband. Under this hatred and enmity, what joy is there? What is worth celebrating? Thus, during this grand ceremony, there will be no singing and dancing, no praise and acclamation, and no one will be allowed to present tribute. Today we will only speak of the events that have happened over my 100-year reign and of our plans for next 100 years. If one observed the features of the little demon empress, one would discover that she was so beautiful, even the sun and the moon paled in comparison. But accompanying those beautiful features was a heavy oppressive aura which could overturn both heaven and earth. Even if she was a ruler, this kind of oppressive aura was simply too heavy. It was so heavy that it was sufficient to cause a powerhouse of the profound world to have difficulty breathing when they faced her. This kind of oppression, which was terrifying enough to cause one's heart to palpitate, was completely enough to cover up her breathtaking looks. She stood in front of the throne, coldly surveying the 100,000 experts of the illusory demon realm gathered here, and began to slowly speak. Every word that proceeded from her mouth was ear-splitting to the point where one might go deaf. Each word contained the power to completely shake one's heart and soul. Every large force in the whole did not only have great strength, they also held key responsibilities within the illusory demon realm, but every single one of them bent their heads and silently listened. No one dared to raise their head to look directly at her, and not a single disrespectful movement was made. A girl who only looked like she was 15 at most, and she was even recognized as the #1 beauty in the illusory demon realm. Yet she was the ruler of the billions of citizens within the illusory demon realm. For the Yunche who had seen the little demon empress for the first time, the impact it had on his spirit and eyes was undoubtedly extremely big. The little demon empress raised her right arm and her broad grey sleeve hung down to expose her snowy and tender palm, while also revealing a part of her white jade arm. The maid who was standing to her right slowly stepped forward, bending her head as she presented a small scarlet wine cup. The little demon empress slowly picked up the wine cup, and the audience hurriedly scrambled to pick up the wine cups that were prepared for them. Once they had done so, they held the wine cup in clasped hands and held them out towards the little demon empress. Today's grand ceremony will begin with this cup of wine. The little demon empress raised her hand to the sky and she wore an expression of such majesty on her young and girlish face that no one could despise her. This cup is to first salute our illusory demon realm. To secondly salute all the ancestors of the line of the demon emperor. And to thirdly salute all of you who are gathered here today. All of you are the cornerstones, pillars and walls of my illusory demon realm, and for the past 100 years, this empress has completely relied on your strength to assist me. This empress will make the first toast to show my respect. As the little demon empress' voice fell, she had already raised her head high to drink the wine in her cup. Thank you, little demon empress. All the people gathered were terrified without exception, and they hastily drank the wine in their cups in panic, not daring to leave even a single drop. There were some who were so excited that their hands began to shake, because in the 100-year reign ceremony, it has always been them who toasted the demon emperor first. But this time, it was the little demon empress who made the first toast, and this naturally filled them with extreme terror. The little demon empress set down her wine cup and surveyed the people once more. Those eyes, which were already filled with a heavy aura of death, suddenly released a bone-piercing coldness. She asked in a bland voice, who was it that planned today's seating arrangements? Everyone in the great hall immediately held their breaths. Those who were not in the know looked at each other helplessly, while the faces of those who dwelt in the demon imperial city suddenly changed. The seating arrangements of the 12 families had been constant for 10,000 years, and everyone did not doubt that the little demon empress could tell the problem of this grand ceremony's seating arrangements with one glance. But no one had guessed that a mere second after she had toasted all the heroes and important ministers of the land, she would, in front of all who were present, suddenly inquire regarding this matter in the middle of this grand ceremony. This turnaround was so quick that it left everyone helpless and at a loss. Oh, Yunche stretched his neck. Even he did not expect the little demon empress to suddenly make such an ill-timed action. The great hall descended into a dead silence for a few breaths, after which, a man slowly stood up from among the seats in the east wing. It was Duke Huai himself. He bowed in salute and said, reporting to the little demon empress, it was this humble duke who arranged the seats. HMPH. The little demon empress raised her eyebrows and coldly said, it has already been 10,000 years from the time the 12 families followed the first demon emperor to conquer the realm till today, and in these 10,000 years, the seating arrangement during a demon emperor's grand ceremony has never changed. So why did you change the seats of the 12 families? You'd better give this empress a satisfactory explanation. This time, he had arranged the seats to give the little demon empress a show of his strength, to let her know that the power that should have belonged solely to the line of the demon emperor has now largely shifted towards him. But little did he expect that she would suddenly spring this difficult question on him during the grand ceremony. He replied in an unperturbed manner, reporting to the little demon empress, this humble duke participated in the arrangement of this grand ceremony, so I did not dare be careless. I had first asked the various patriarchs and dukes on where they would prefer to be seated, but I did not think that the majority of them wanted to sit in the east wing, so this humble duke independently decided to change the seating arrangements of the 12 families and the various duke palaces. I hope that the little demon empress will forgive me. The words that had just been uttered by Duke Huai did not mean much to the people who came from outside the demon imperial city. At most, they would only find it strange that Duke Huai would ask the various families where they wanted to sit when he was organizing this grand ceremony. But the powers within the demon imperial city naturally understood exactly what he was saying. That the so-called majority that wanted to sit in the east wing was clearly the majority who were willing to swear their allegiance to Duke Huai. Independently decided? The little demon empress narrowed her eyes slightly, and even this slight change in expression caused the atmosphere within the entire great hall to abruptly turn cold, And who gave you this power to make such a decision? The 12 families and the Duke palaces are supposed to be placed on equal footing, and the only one who has the power to change the seats of the 12 families and the Duke palaces is only this Empress. When was it up to you to arrange the positions of the 12 families? In the next grand ceremony, do you also want to change the seat of this Empress as well? This humble Duke does not dare. Duke Huai hurriedly bowed and lowered his head. His face was filled with anxiety and panic as he secretly ground his teeth together. With all the heroes of the realm as witness, he naturally could not retort even if he received such a harsh rebuke from the little demon Empress. He could only earnestly endure it. The little demon Empress' gaze swiveled and she looked in the direction of the various guardian families and Duke palaces seated in the East Wing. Her tender lips curled up and she slowly punctuated each and every word in an extremely bland voice. All of you, like, to sit in the East Wing. The East Wing held 7 of the great guardian families and 60 Duke palaces, but under the concentrated gaze of the little demon Empress, every single one of them felt their hearts tighten up in anxiety as their hands turned cold and clammy. It felt as if an icy-cold blade had been placed at their throats. This feeling was exacerbated by the fact they all had harbored ulterior motives in their heart. Forget about talking, none of them even dared to raise their heads. Every single one of them held their breaths and did not even dare to gasp for air. And even Yun Che, who was seated in the West Wing, could feel an incomparably heavy aura of oppression. He couldn't help but be silently amazed. This little demon Empress aura was simply too terrifying, but then again, it was not surprising. 100 years ago, she first lost her father and then lost the husband she had married not too long ago, who was also her younger brother. As the last person who bore the bloodline of the demon emperor, she had no choice but to bear this heavy burden, and despite that, all these years, certain people had been trying to snatch away the 10,000-year legacy of her ancestors. To be filled with hatred against both heaven and earth was not even enough to describe the feelings she held in her heart and soul. Moreover, she was simply too tiny and delicate, while her features were the crown of the mortal world. So if she did not have a sufficiently imposing aura, how could she then rule over all the heroes of the realm? The great hall was filled with a deathly stillness as the 7 guardian families and 60 Duke palaces didn't dare to reply. They had only thrown in with Duke Huai because they witnessed his strength growing stronger as the days passed, and if they didn't make such a choice, when the little demon Empress was forced to abdicate, even if they were not destroyed, they would definitely not be well off. So even if they were now inclined towards Duke Huai, it definitely did not mean that they did not fear the little demon Empress. Patriarch Helion, why don't you answer this Empress question? Why did you choose to sit in the East Wing? As the patriarch of the Helion family, Helion Kwong had enough power and status to lord over the entire illusory demon realm, and his name fit his disposition as he was famous for being fearlessly domineering and arrogant. But once his name was abruptly spoken by the little demon Empress, the entire Helion family felt their bodies fiercely quiver. He stood up and clasped his hands. But as he was about to speak, his gaze suddenly met with the gloomy and chilly gaze of the little demon Empress, and his heart immediately froze in his chest as he felt a chill run through his entire body. His mouth flapped open quite a few times, yet he could not utter even a single word. No one had expected the atmosphere to suddenly become frozen right as the grand ceremony began. At this time, Yun Qinghong stood up and he spoke in a reverential tone. I beseech the little demon Empress to calm her anger. This Yun has something to say. The little demon Empress was unfazed and she blandly said, Speak. Yun Qinghong continued, Yes. Today is the anniversary of the little demon Empress' 100-year reign. This ceremony is witnessed by all under heaven, and all the heroes of the realm have come from the length and breadth of the realm to celebrate this day with you. Even though the change in the seating arrangement is a little unseemly, but in the end, seats are merely seats. In the eyes of this Yun, it is not such a big deal. If the little demon Empress is not happy that Duke Huai has independently rearranged the seats, you can order him to change it back once the grand ceremony is over. There is simply no need to dampen the atmosphere over such a trivial matter. Yun Qinghong's intention was partly to advise the little demon Empress to remain calm, and partly as hidden mockery. The little demon Empress faintly arched her brows, and after that, she slowly nodded her head. Patriarch Yun is indeed correct. This sort of trivial matter is simply not worthy of this Empress' attention. Patriarch Yun, please be seated. Helion Kwong, you may also withdraw. One was asked to please be seated, the other was ordered to withdraw. One was addressed as Patriarch Yun, while the other was directly addressed as Hellion Kwang. It was so blindingly obvious who the little demon empress favored more, even a fool could tell with a glance. The Hellion family had been suppressed by the Yun family for 10,000 years, but for the first time in history, they were the chief representatives. So not only were they unusually pleased with themselves, they also kept shooting taunting gazes over at the Yun family to provoke them and show their dominance. But now, they had been slapped on the mouth by no less than the little demon empress herself, and this was even done in front of all the heroes of the realm, as all their prestige went down the drain. As for the Duke Huai, who still stood there bowing, it was as if the little demon empress had forgotten about his existence. She did not continue to bother with him, and Duke Huai could only give a resentful laugh as he retook his seat. Yun Che silently pondered to himself, the temperament of this little demon empress was simply too unyielding and overbearing. Duke Huai tried to use the seating arrangements to give the little demon empress a show of his strength, but she borrowed this little display to slap him across the face. This woman, I definitely cannot afford to provoke her. As Yun Che was lost in thought, he suddenly saw the little demon empress gaze swivel in his direction. His heart was filled with shock, and he hurriedly ducked his head as he prattled on inwardly like a broken record. Please do not see me. Please do not see me. Please do not see me. The little demon empress tacitly nodded at Yun Qinghong, but all of a sudden, her eyes flashed fiercely and they bored in on the person who stood by Yun Qinghong's side. The sudden change in the little demon empress' eyes startled Yun Qinghong, but he immediately realized that the person the little demon empress was scrutinizing was not him, but it was Yun Che instead. Just as he was about to rise and take the initiative to ask, the little demon empress opened her lips and asked, Patriarch Yun, this empress has heard that you have just taken in a godson. Is it that person who is beside you? Yun Che, at $. As expected, I was still discovered. Yun Qinghong stood up and replied, reporting to the little demon empress, yes, it is as you say. My godson's surname is also Yun, with the name Che, and he has a great affinity with this Yun's family. 3 months ago, he saved my unworthy son's life, and he even became sworn brothers with my unworthy son. So this Yun simply went with the flow, and I took him in as a godson. Chea, what are you waiting for? Rise and greet the little demon empress. Yun Che put on a brave face and rose while plastering an extremely honest smile on his face. Yun family's Yun Che greets the little demon empress. Even though Yun Che's head was bent, he could still clearly feel a killing gaze piercing into his body, as if it wanted to directly pierce all his internal organs. Yun Che had never believed that a gaze could kill, but right now, the gaze of this little demon empress could definitely cause a timid person's courage to rupture, causing him to die on the spot. Fortunately, this killing gaze only endured for an instant. Following that, the little demon empress' cold and lifeless voice rang through the air, and she only said 3 words, you may sit. Yun Che's bottom hit the chair and he silently breathed a sigh of relief. Mu Yuro gently pulled on Yun Qinghong's sleeve and whispered, our son, has he met the little demon empress before? I'm afraid that it's a lot more than met this time. Yun Qinghong said with a bitter laugh. But, in this period of time, Chea has hardly left the house. Moreover, the little demon empress is also not a figure that normal people can meet, so how is that possible? Mu Yuro said in a mystified voice. Yun Qinghong lapsed into a momentary silence, but after that, he slowly said, 3 days ago, in the dead of the night, I detected Chea concealing his own presence. After he had circled around the Yun family household, he left and headed north. And his present concealment could be said to be perfect, if not for the fact that I occasionally saw a black shadow flitting about, even I would not be able to detect it. Not long after that, the aura of the Golden Crow's flames exploded from somewhere north of the city, and from the pureness of that aura, it could only be the little demon empress. And it was only a short period after that incident that Chea returned home. I didn't think too much of it back then, but now that I think about it, something big seems to have happened that night, and those Golden Crow flames might very well have been directly targeted at Chea. This? Mu Yuro had a face full of astonishment. The little demon empress returned to her throne, and her towering imperial majesty enveloped the entire demon imperial hall, causing the air to be so stifled that it stopped moving, while each and every one of her words struck directly at everyone's heart and soul. After the little demon empress had found out that he was not dead, and it had to be in this particular great hall, even though Yunche had been through extraordinary experiences, he was still scared witless. Among all the people he had seen in his 2 lives, whether it was tyrannical power, an astonishing manner, or a cutting gaze, no one could compare with this person. Of course, this excluded the abnormal existence that was Jasmine. But if the emperor of the divine Phoenix nation, Feng Hongkong, was compared with her, one could simply say that he would not even have a single speck of an emperor's prestige or might in comparison. The little demon empress' words reverberated in every corner of this great hall, but Yunche did not continue to listen to what she said. Instead, he faintly shut his eyes and began to sincerely organize all of the findings regarding the history of the 12 families that he had gathered over this 1 month, and he began to ponder on how he should go about dealing with the coming scenario. Even though this little demon empress had very nearly sent him on his way to the afterlife, he still had to repay this evil with kindness because he was a member of the Yun family. To think that there would actually come a day that I, Yunche, would have to repay evil with kindness. Ah. Since this is so, let us start with the Northern Ocean domain. The little demon empress' gaze fell on someone who was seated in the back of the hall. Is the ruler of the Northern Ocean domain here? A tall and imposing man who was dressed fully in blue stood up, and he replied in an incomparably reverential and sincere voice, reporting to the little demon empress, the Northern Ocean domain is under this humble Kong Jingsang's governance. The Northern Ocean domain currently has a population of 73 million people, and this population consists of 91 different races. Humans comprise 40%, while demons comprise 60%. 74 years ago, the Wild Wolf clan rebelled, and this rebellion was quelled in 4 years. 53 years ago, a natural disaster suddenly occurred as the northern Sky Mountain erupted, and this calamity was only averted because the little demon empress had sent enough people to help. Currently, the Northern Ocean domain is at peace, with no disasters or rebellions. This humble one is the lord of the profound demon city, Feng Daosong. Profound Demon City and its surrounding regions have a total population of 53 million. The population consists of 227 races. The core of our economy is still the professions of crafting profound formations and blacksmithing. Currently, my Profound Demon City has 3 of the 10 greatest profound formation masters in the illusory demon realm. This humble one is the lord of the 5-way domain, Lan Tengwu. For the past 100 years, we have defended the border, not even letting down our guards for a single day, and we will definitely not allow the villains of the profound sky continent to even take a step into our realm. The various lords began to declare the prominent events that had happened to their territories one after the other. In the center of the East Wing, Duke Huai had a leisurely expression on his face, but his eyes betrayed his true unease. He kept looking in the direction of the Yun family, and finally he crossed gazes with Yun Qinghong. Both of their eyes narrowed at the same time, and Duke Huai gave a dull laugh. Yun Qinghong responded with a faint smile, but his smile carried an unmistakable clear disdain. Duke Huai's eyebrows furrowed fiercely. Even though the two of them only had their eyes and expressions cross for that short span of time, they had issued what could be said to be an ultimatum to each other. Duke Huai was asking, "Have you thought things through yet, and decided to stand with this duke? This is your, and the Yun family's, final chance." But Yun Qinghong's reply was only a short 2 words. "Ha ha." Duke Zhong, who was beside Duke Huai, saw his facial expression change, smiled lightly and said, "I can see that you are truly being cautious about Yun Qinghong, and frankly, I can't really understand it. This duke will not deny it." Duke Huai said with a stony expression. This duke was most at ease during the years he was crippled. But when he healed without any warning, it was like a needle pierced through this duke's heart. This duke felt that Yun Qinghong sees through what this duke has prepared to do at this grand ceremony, and when that moment comes, he would certainly take action. If you fear Yun Qinghong that much, you must know his temper very well. Then, according to your understanding of him, do you think it's possible for him to fall on our side? Duke Zhong asked gradually. Duke Huai's breathing stuttered, then he shook his head. Impossible. If we already know that it's impossible, then why waste our emotions and hold on to this non-existent chance to try and rope him in? Duke Huai didn't say a word. If Duke Huai is really afraid of Yun Qinghong ruining the plan, there is a simple way to take care of the problem. Duke Zhong said with a sneer, "We could make it so he wouldn't even be qualified to speak later. Wouldn't that solve the problem?" The moment Duke Zhong said this, Duke Huai instantly knew what he wanted to do. After a brief silence, he gradually nodded his head. Duke Zhong smiled, glanced sideways, slightly moved his lips, and sent a profound energy sound conversion to a person sitting on the edge of the seats, and signaled the person. Yunche wasn't interested in the things the lords had to report. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly asked Yun Qinghong, "Father, the people who joined together to provoke the public's opinion and pressured the little demon empress to punish our Yun family, were the 7 guardian families across us, right?" Yun Qinghong didn't say a word, and nodded slowly. Yunche locked his eyebrows and said, "At the 100-year reign ceremony, the guardian families and each major duke palace would perform on stage. There's even a tradition of a sparring competition, and there would be no exception this time. If I'm not wrong, the dukes across us would definitely find an opportunity to bring this up, and the method of the sparring competition would very likely be the East Wing against the West Wing." "That's what Duke Huai would do," Yun Qinghong said calmly. "With a little demon empress who could take a great setback, and us who refused to join his faction, how could he not? Or else, he wouldn't have deliberately arranged the seats like this. It all comes down to what reason he uses." 2 hours had passed calmly at the grand ceremony. This grand ceremony, according to the original plan, would continue for at least 3 days and 3 nights. This was just the beginning. At this moment, King Zhennan, who was stationed in the southern border, had just finished reporting what had happened over the 100 years. As soon as he got down, in the corner of the seats on the east, a young duke whose position was basically on the bottom rung suddenly stood up. The little demon empress glanced at him and said faintly, "Duke Chu, is there something you would like to report?" "Yes." The person who was called Duke Chu quickly moved to the front of the seats. When he spoke, his voice was obviously trembling. "There is an issue that has been bothering this humble duke for a long time. But this is an important issue, and it could possibly upset some of the superior figures here, so I don't know whether or not I should bring it to light." The little demon empress' dark eyes narrowed, and she said coldly, "If you don't know whether or not you should speak, then don't speak. Step down." It was as if Duke Chu's throat was suddenly stabbed with a knife. He prepared for so long, but he couldn't utter the words that were on the tip of his tongue, and his face was bloated until it was all red. When he said he didn't know whether or not he should bring it to light, it was only something he said to slow down and foreshadow his next words. But he didn't expect the little demon empress to shoot him down with just one sentence before having the chance to continue to say it. His face twitched as he responded, "Yes," and stepped down awkwardly. "This idiot." In the center of the East Wing, Duke Huai scoffed. At this moment, a person who was not far on the right from where Duke Chu was sitting stood up. From his appearance, he was one of the dukes as well. He cupped his hands, and said in a loud voice, reporting to Little Demon Empress, "This humble duke has something to say." This issue had been on this humble duke's mind for a long time. If it were said out loud, it might also upset some of the superior figures or even induce hatred. But this is an issue related to the illusory demon royal family's reputation, and even the future of the illusory demon realm. Even if people hold grudges against this humble duke, I have to say it no matter what. "Oh, is that so?" The eyes of the little demon empress were like stars dotted in the night sky. "Then this empress shall listen to what Duke Xiong has to say, and see exactly how serious this issue is." Duke Xiong slightly gnashed his teeth, and said with a serious expression, "This humble duke earnestly requests Little Demon Empress to remove the Yun family from the 12 guardian families, and replace them with a force that has the ability and the qualification." Wow! The entire hall immediately went into an uproar with what Duke Xiong had said. No one had thought that the serious issue Duke Xiong was going to address would be this shocking. The 12 guardian families were the 12 families who followed the first demon emperor and ruled the illusory demon realm. Their existences were supreme like a sacred ground, and they were on the top of the illusory demon realm. The Yun family, in the past 10,000 years, had been the head of the 12 families, and had always been most valued by the demon emperor's clan. They had only been rapidly declining in the last century because of the profound Sky Continent incident. Even though this Duke Xiong was also a duke, his position was low in the royal clan. Their Duke Palace's force was not enough to compare with any of the 12 families. Now, in the presence of the little demon empress, the 12 families, and all those under heaven, he unexpectedly asked the Yun family to step down from the 12 guardian families. This was simply like dropping a clap of thunder from the sky. The little demon empress suddenly narrowed her eyes, and the top and bottom of the Yun family were all furious. Yun Qinghong didn't have much of a reaction, but not everyone was as calm as Yun Qinghong. Great Elder Yun Weitian suddenly stood up, not even caring that this was the grand ceremony, and cursed out loud, "You bold maniac, who do you think you are? How dare you speak of such nonsense?" That Duke Xiong was surprisingly calm as he said softly, "Great Elder Yun, please watch your manners. Don't let the world know that the Yun family's manners are like this." Yun Weitian sneered, "My manners are only for people who deserve it. An ungrateful dog who abandons its ancestors for profit and obey to someone else's orders doesn't deserve my manners." Yun Weitian's words were so vicious that they made Duke Xiong's calm face suddenly turn into the color of pig liver, as his lips trembled with rage. "Yun Weitian, you have gone too far. You were the one who went too far. Enough, the two of you, don't go into a war of words." Duke Huai stood up at this moment. The Yun, Mu, under heaven, Yang, and Su family had already been suspicious of the shocking words this Duke Xiong suddenly stood up and said, thinking that it must be an order from Duke Huai. Now that he had stood up, it made it even more unmistakable. Duke Huai didn't wait for the little demon empress to speak first, and said while smiling, "Duke Xiong, the Yun family had been part of the 12 guardian families for all previous generations of demon emperors, for 10,000 of years. They could be said to have had many contributions, but you suddenly report to ask the little demon empress to have the Yun family be removed from the guardian families. You should at least give us a reason for it." Duke Xiong quickly said, "If this humble duke doesn't have a sufficient reason, how would I dare to say something about an issue so serious? And removing the Yun family from the 12 guardian families is not something that was thought of only by this humble duke. Of the people this humble duke knows, 8 or 9 out of 10 agree. The reasons are naturally sufficient, and each and every one of them is known by all." Duke Huai stood up with his hands on his waist. It emboldened this Duke Xiong's confidence, as he said with composure, "As the Demon Emperor's 12 guardian families, a strong ability is the basic requirement. At least, they should have an unbeatable late-stage monarch. Back in the days, the Yun family had the most late-stage monarchs among the 12 guardian families, and none of the families could compete with them. But 100 years ago, Yun family's 11 late-stage monarchs all died in the profound sky continent. The Yun family now doesn't even have a late-stage monarch. The strongest of the whole family, Grand Elder Yun Jiang, is only at the 6th level of the sovereign profound realm. The whole world knows, having a late-stage monarch was the symbol of the highest force in the illusory demon realm, but the Yun family doesn't have one anymore. A Yun family like this doesn't even count as a top force, so how could it be qualified to be one of the 12 guardian families directly under the little demon empress? How could they have the ability to guard the demon emperor's bloodline?" Poor remark. Duke Huai shook his head. 100 years ago, the Yun family faced incredible difficulties. These were the consequences caused the impulse of Yun Songhai. Even if the Yun family doesn't have a late-stage monarch now, with Yun family's background, and given enough time, there might be one in the future. "No. That's impossible." Duke Xiong shook his head assuredly. "What decides a family's future is the ability of the young generation. But, in Demon Imperial City, who doesn't know how weak the Yun family's young generations are? Of those under the age of 30, less than 5 are overlords, and the highest power they have now is at the 2nd level of the tyrant profound realm. Oh, I heard that there was a Yun Xinyu who was passable, but unfortunately, he had already passed away. With a Yun family like this, what kind of future do they still have? What qualifications do they have to hold onto the title of guardians? If a family like this can guard the Demon Emperor, wouldn't it be a disgrace to the Demon Emperor's bloodline, and be laughed at by the whole world?" "Shut up." It was as if Yun Weishan's heart was stabbed when the name, Yun Xinyu, was brought up. He trembled in anger. "The reason the young generation of Yun family are weak was because we were plotted against, and were forced to endure the heavy liability. Or else, with the background of the Yun family, and the power of profound handle of the Yun family, we would never be weaker than anyone. Duke Xiong sneered. Great Elder Yun's words has just reminded this Duke. That's right, Great Elder Yun's words is the second reason. And that's the Yun family's misdeed. Duke Xiong pointed at where the Yun family was sitting, and yelled loudly, the little demon empress has been on the throne for a full 100 years, but still wasn't able to inherit the Golden Crow in Golden Crow Lightning Flame Valley, and why is that so? Could it be that your Yun family don't know why? Yun Weishan's body shook violently. This was his Yun family's greatest weakness. Even though he was furious, he couldn't say anything about it. Because 100 years ago, the Demon Emperor's seal was lost because of the Yun family, and the Mirror of Samsara was also lost because of the Yun family. These were irrefutable facts. Your Yun family lost the Demon Emperor's seal, preventing the little Demon Empress from awakening the Golden Crow's bloodline to achieve the highest of powers. It was all thanks to you, Yun family. The Mirror of Samsara was a treasure passed down from the first Demon Emperor. The previous Demon Emperor trusted you Yun family fully, and let the Yun family guard it, but you lost it, and even lost it in profound Sky Continent, the land of our sworn enemy. Not only should you be sorry to the previous Demon Emperor, sorry to the little Demon Empress, you should be even more sorry to all of the ancestors of the Demon Emperor's bloodline. With low ability and such heinous crimes that arouses great indignation, the little Demon Empress showed a lot of mercy by continuing to let you keep the title of Guardian Family for a full 100 years. But you Yun family should ask yourselves, what capability, what qualifications, and what dignity do you have to remain on the position of Guardian? This Duke Xiong's words were very sharp, and his tone was very furious and agitated. Each sentence was straight to the point. The people in the crowd were all moved by what he was saying and were agreeing to it. It was no wonder that Duke Huai let him come forward. Clap, 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 clap. A burst of applause sounded. Duke Xiong stood up while clapping, and said with a serious expression, Duke Xiong, that was on point. The Yun family is sinful, and their strength has weakened too much. These issues are well known by everyone, but they are still staying as one of the guardian families. At first, this Duke didn't think much about it, but hearing what Duke Xiong had said, this Duke felt enlightened by these facts. It's true that with the Yun family's strength now, and the other sins that they've committed, they should not continue to carry on the responsibility of guardian, or else, they really would disgrace and drag down the reputation of the royal family, and become a joke for everyone. Because of the Yun family's crime, it was too merciful for the little Demon Empress to only cut off their 100 years' resources. It wouldn't be too much to kick them out of Demon Imperial City right this moment. A load of rubbish. Old Man Mu stood up in rage, pointed towards Duke Xiong and roared, the Yun family has protected the Demon Emperor for 10,000 years and everyone knows their accomplishments are greater higher than the heavens. They are the most deserving to be the leading family of the 12 families. Even if they have faulted, it cannot hide the accomplishments that they have done for 10,000 years. You all know fully well the reason why the Yun family's strengths have diminished. As for the future of the Yun family, you guys are even less worthy to criticize it. Instead, I want to ask, for what motive do you all have for ganging up together to force the Yun family out of the 12 guardian families? Mu Fei Yan was the eldest among the 12 patriarchs. Along with his loud voice and dense profound strength, he caused the ears of everyone in the great hall to buzz. Duke Xiong did not panic and merely laughed. Senior Mu, please calm down. What sort of motive could this duke have? This duke is just a small duke within the illusory demon royal family, whose blood originates from the first demon emperor. Naturally, all this duke does is for the sake of the demon emperor's bloodline. Even if this duke would invite hatred onto myself, for the sake of the demon emperor's bloodline, this duke has no choice but to say it. How righteous you sound. The Su family patriarch, Su Xiangnan, stood up, then looked intently at Duke Huai and Duke Xiong. Although my Su family has also existed to protect the Demon Emperor for generations, based on qualifications and accomplishments, we are far below the Yun family. If even the Yun family has to be expelled from the ranks of the guardian families, then which family would deserve to stay? Wouldn't this be disheartening for all the people out there who are loyal to the Demon Emperor's bloodline? What Patriarch Su said is completely wrong. The Hellion family patriarch, Hellion Kwong, rose from his seat and loudly replied, The fact that the Yun family has vast accomplishments is something that cannot be denied, but they have also committed an unforgivable mistake that would cause all the Demon Emperor ancestors unrest. The Yun family's vast achievements have led to them obtaining their deserved glory and rewards. So shouldn't they receive their deserved punishment for the mistakes that they have done? If they are still allowed to stay in the Guardian families after such an unforgivable mistake, wouldn't it be telling us, the other Guardian families, that we don't have to worry about making mistakes, and can act as we please? If it's like this, how could the souls of the generations of demon emperors rest? Where would the justice of the legislation of illusory demons lie? This is what would be truly disheartening for the people. I, Hellion Kwong, represent the entire Hellion family to fully support Duke Xiong and Duke Zhong in kicking the Yun family out of the Guardian families. We, the Jiufang family, also fully support the removal of the Yun family from the Guardian families. We, the Nangong family, fully support as well. A large faction that supported kicking the Yun family out of the Guardian families rose in support. Just like a hurricane sweeping past this ocean, a large commotion was created. Naturally, this commotion came from the East Wing seats. At the same, some people who weren't too sure were influenced by what was said and started to feel that the Yun family did not deserve to remain within the Guardian families. They shouted along as well, and as the commotion became louder, more and more people were influenced along. In the blink of an eye, the Yun family had become the target of the people, as the entire hall burst with shouts for the Yun family's removal from the Guardian families. The only ones who were completely clear about what happened were the top powers of Demon Imperial City, especially the Guardian families and those of the Duke palaces sitting in the West Wing seats. As the jeers grew louder and louder, all of them trembled in rage. Duke Huai's faction was already frightening. If the Yun family were to be chased away, they would not have any power to resist them anymore. Looks like this is where the will of the people lie. Looks like the Yun family is no longer suitable to continue guarding the little demon empress. Duke Huai laughed. The Yang family patriarch, Yang Zijing, stood up agitatedly and raged, "All of you who have ulterior motives, don't waste your efforts. We, the Guardian families, only serve the bloodline of the demon emperor. In this world, only the little demon empress is able to command the Guardian families and decide our fates. The little demon empress naturally has an opinion on whether the Yun family deserves to remain in the Guardian families. Other than the little demon empress, none of you have any right to decide." The little demon empress' expression sunk. Just as she was about to speak, Duke Huai spoke before she could, and said loudly, "Patriarch Yang's words are indeed correct. As the ruler of the illusory demon realm, the little demon empress is naturally the highest authority. But, not only do we, the various dukes and the Guardian families, have to serve her loyally, we also have the duty to remonstrate her, especially concerning major matters that involve the prestige and pride of the Demon Emperor bloodline. The mistake that the Yun family made is undoubtedly a major one, yet the little Demon Empress allowed the Yun family to remain within the Guardian families for the past 100 years, and only received small punishments. This is already great magnanimity that the little Demon Empress has shown the Yun family. However, if the Yun family remained in the Guardian families, it would be too soft-hearted of her, and how would such soft-heartedness be befitting of a ruler? A real ruler should be clear with rewards and punishment and even decisive when killing. Otherwise what? Even though the little Demon Empress looked calm, her gaze was icy cold. Looks like Duke Huai is more competent than this Empress on how to be a ruler. This humble Duke does not dare. Duke Huai replied calmly, "The Yun family and my Duke Palace have no grudges. Patriarch Yun and this humble Duke could even be considered to be friends. All that this humble Duke has said does not benefit me other than causing the Yun family patriarch to be unhappy with this humble Duke, or even hate this humble Duke. However, this is something that this humble Duke has to say. This humble Duke is absolutely sincere, and all that this humble Duke has done is for the illusory demon royal family. I beg little Demon Empress to please consider." This humble Duke also begs little Demon Empress to please consider. Duke Zhong said in a righteous manner. "Little Demon Empress, the 12 Guardian families definitely cannot lose the Yun family, definitely cannot." Su Xiangnan shouted out respectfully. The arena was instantly chaotic. None of the rulers outside of the demon imperial city could have imagined that just one phrase from Duke Xiong would lead to such a huge commotion. At this point, the smarter ones were already able to see some things regarding the situation. Then, an elderly duke who was from the late demon emperor's generation stood up and said, "Since this matter is looked so heavily upon by the various dukes and guardian families and has created such a conflict, it cannot be rashly decided. Otherwise, it would only be disheartening for the citizens. However, this old subject has a suggestion." The little demon empress looked on coldly without speaking. Since the old man was sat at the east wing seats, he was obviously on the side of Duke Huai and would definitely not say anything that was beneficial to her. However, with so many people present, she obviously could not reprimand a 1,000-year-old subject. She only inwardly sneered. "Senior, please speak, I'm all open to ideas." Duke Huai looked on respectfully. The elderly duke sighed pretentiously, and said, "The various dukes and guardian families are the cornerstones of illusory the demon realm. Other than the little demon empress, the dukes and the guardian families do indeed have the most right to speak. It seems as though the decision of whether the Yun family is qualified to remain in the guardian families only concerns the Yun clan themselves, but in regards to such a major matter, it cannot be decided based on one person's private wishes. Since it's like this, why not let all the dukes and guardian families whose right to speak is only second to the little demon empress help the little demon empress decide? Since everyone is gathered here, we shall let them witness whether there are more people supporting the Yun family to remain within the guardian families, or whether there are more who support their removal from the guardian families. Whichever side has more people, will be the side we shall abide by. Isn't this the fairest way? Little demon empress, how is this old subject's suggestion?" What the old duke said was definitely reasonable, fair, and without loopholes. Under such conditions, even if the little demon empress's temperament was much tougher, she would still not be able to retort against his words. On the other hand, Duke Huai was already nodding in agreement. If the majority of the dukes and the guardian families who have been guarding the demon emperor along with the Yun family also think that the Yun family does not have any right to remain, yet they still remain, this duke would not be satisfied, the whole illusory demon royal family would not be satisfied, and even everyone in this world would not be satisfied. This is indeed the fairest method, and this duke would not have any complaints about the results obtained from such a method. Duke Zhong also said loudly. "Good." Duke Huai raised a hand, righteous, asking, "All right. Then let this duke and everyone else clearly see whether the Yun family has the right to remain." Various illusory demon dukes, all the patriarchs of the guardian families, those who agree with this duke that the Yun family should be kicked out of the guardian families, please rise. Whoosh! Just when Duke Huai finished speaking, Helian family's patriarch Helian Kwong, Kai Yang family's patriarch Kai Yang Bailey, Bai family's patriarch Bai Yi, Nangong family's patriarch Nangong Shi, Lin family's patriarch Lin Guiyang, Jiufang family's patriarch Jiufang Kuei, Xiao family's patriarch Xiao Shifeng, and 60 various other duke palaces all stood up. The Yun family has long lost the right to remain, they must be removed. I, Helian Kwong, am the first to support this. What Duke Huai has said is what I, Kai Yang Bailey, has thought all these years. If the Yun family remains, my Bai family would not be satisfied. 7 guardian families, 60 duke palaces, in terms of numbers, this was sufficient to completely overwhelm the opposition. Within the shouts for the Yun family to leave the guardian families, Duke Zhong broke into a slight smile, whispering to Duke Huai, "Now Duke Huai no longer has to worry about Yun Qinghong spoiling matters, right? Once they are kicked out of the guardian families, they won't have any rights to speak at this ceremony." Duke Huai squinted, then suddenly laughed coldly. Such a great occasion and atmosphere, it's such a waste to only beat down a Yun family. Duke Zhong's eyes flashed. Duke Huai, what do you mean? Of course it is to use this opportunity to embarrass those fellows who still remain obstinate, making them unable to raise their heads and straighten their back during this grand ceremony. Also, we can let little demon empress know just how easy it is for this duke to replace her. Looks Duke Huai is already well aware of what to do next. As expected of Duke Huai, to be able to follow you is the smartest decision this duke has made. Duke Zhong laughed heartily. Without question, no matter if it was the guardian families or the duke palaces, those who stood up were all from the east wing seats. Old Man Moo laughed coldly and roared, "All those who oppose to the Yun family leaving, stand up. Do you really think we're all herbivores?" Old Man Moo's words were deafening. Su family's patriarch Su Xiaonan, under heaven family's patriarch greatest ambition under heaven, Yang family's patriarch Yang Chengkong and the 40 duke palaces on the west wing seats all stood up neatly, each one of them with serious and angry expressions. One side had 7 guardian families and 60 duke palaces. Excluding the Yun family, the other side only had 4 guardian families and 40 duke palaces. It was obvious which side was stronger with just one glance. What was even more obvious was that all the families that wanted the Yun family to leave the guardian families were in the east wing seats. And those who opposed the Yun family leaving were all seated in the west wing seats. Even a fool could tell that now there was something was odd about this with such an obvious confrontation. This was obviously 2 entirely different factions. This was not a fight over the leaving or staying of the Yun family, but the confrontation between 2 factions that suddenly sprung up. What was even more evident was that Duke Huai's faction was far stronger than the faction the Yun family resided in. Author's note: because of some event a few days back, in order to earn milk powder money for my future daughter, this Mars withstood the pain and chopped off his arm. Due to slow regrowth speed, the speed of typing has been reduced drastically. That's right, this was the reason why I didn't release a chapter yesterday. I know you guys will completely believe me. Episode 97 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.